If you're receiving this video, hello and welcome. My name is Diana McNeil, as most of you know, and you are here because you are in one or both of our fall programs with the Mindful Movement RX platform. So whether you're in Yoga for Balance and Bones or whether you're in Move Better 55 Plus, here are a few things I want you to think about, maybe try on your own, and of course, reach out to me at any point in time if you need clarification or you would like me to check your posture in certain moves and or transitions throughout this series. I am always online 15 to 10 minutes or 10 to 15 minutes before class starts, and I am always here after class to answer any of your questions, comments, or just wins or struggles that you're dealing with in getting on your mat team. So most of us know already, because we have a lot of recurring clients in this program, or students, humans, people like you and I, who have been with this program for a while. And what we do know about osteoporosis is that when we are exercising, and perhaps in your everyday life, we want to do our best to maintain a tall posture. That does not mean we need to walk around like a robot or constantly be at attention like you are, marching along, staying nice and tall. But what we do want to think about is our head placement, our shoulder placement, our hip placement, and so on. And it goes something like this. If you place one hand on the top of your head and lengthen up through all four corners of your neck, right? So front, back, left, and right, you want to think about your body stacking vertically. So if I was to put a string from my earlobe and drop it all the way to my ankle, we'd kind of want the center of your ear, shoulder, hip, knees, and ankle bone stacked vertically. So we want to think about that in all of our postures, in all of our exercises. So what that means is we want to move from the joints of our shoulder, our hip, our knees, and our ankles, as opposed to the very flexible and mobile movements of the spine. So we want to try and minimize that articulation. You might have heard that terminology if you've ever taken a traditional Pilates class. There is no articulation in the context of this class. If you have questions pertaining to that, you know where to reach me. The other thing I want to talk about is transitions. We do know that neutral spine is the best place for us to be, especially when we're moving. We're very dynamic in things that we do, and a particular case of lifting weights. We want to maintain that tall spine and move from our hips, knees, and ankles, as opposed to that very flexible, articulating spine. So the other thing I want to talk about is placement of your weight. So before you start any class, if you're in yoga, if you're Move Better 55 Plus, there will be a request for weights coming your way, a request for various props coming your way before our program starts. And of course, at the beginning of every class, you'll also get a list of all the things that you'll need for the class. But see, right now I don't know if you can see, I have weights scattered everywhere. And what I want to think about is placing those weights either on a chair or, because I have a sofa nearby, on a sofa. So grab your weights right now, and I want you to think about placing those weights on an elevated surface. It may not seem important at this time if you're starting off with lower weights, but eventually you'll increase those weights. And we want to think about placing those weights in a safe spot, so that right now I have mine on my sofa off to the side. So when I do have to grab them at any point in time, I don't have to bend over and use that very flexible articulating spine. Instead, I would go down to the ground, hinge from those joints that we've prepared for our class, and again, have them at an elevated height. So again, we know the nice tall posture situation. What I'm going to encourage everybody to do, we're going to start in a supine position, is go grab a few blankets, so you can pause this video, some blankets, some cushions, even a rolled up yoga mat if you have a spare one handy. And we're going to show from the ground up best ways to transition, best ways to support yourself on the ground. So as you can see, I have my stack of props right here. I'm just going to move them off to the side. We're going to set up for a supine position. That means lying on our back. The first thing I'm going to do is roll up a towel. Relatively, you can, if you have a dish towel, that will work. Really narrow, because I know the curve of my low back will need a little bit of support there. Additionally, because a lot of us have this head forward posture, we're going to try and fill that gap so when we're lying on the ground, our chin isn't jutting towards the ceiling. So it's going to go something like this. This is where my low back will lie. This is where my head will be supported. Best practices from our hip, we're going to take the arm that's closest to the ground and slide it away from our body. And then once we're in a side lying position, reposition the smaller, less thick blanket underneath the space between your bottom rib cage and your pelvis, and then transition onto your back. So again, we are just trying to mimic our upright posture, and you can see right here, my chin is nice and flush with the ceiling. If I didn't have that blanket, so I'm going to remove it, oftentimes it would look something like this. So it's more like the angle of my chin is upright. So I'm shortening the muscles, and I'm also shortening the cervical spine and creating a little bit of interdiscal pressure, which we don't really want. So again, we're simply going to support the head. Some of us will need more support, some will be less. Another way to support your head, for those of you who have a high risk category, you might even want to take a little tiny dish towel and place that in a small roll behind your neck. Transitioning, again, really important. Bringing your thighs together, reaching your arm off to the side or overhead, coming to that side lying position, and then press yourself back up. Heading to a 4-point kneel from here. Again, I know we're dealing mostly with bone health, but a lot of us also have osteoarthritis, which is a joint issue. So if you have any issues with the joints of your knees being difficult to kneel on and or sit in a position like this, I'm going to show you a few little tricks. So again, supporting the knees in a couple of different ways. Right now, I'm just adding an extra blanket underneath my knees, and I'm able to kneel comfortably on those knees. That being said, not a lot of people can do that either. So if that causes pain, even with the support, you're gonna fold this up a little bit thicker. And instead of taking your knees on it, you're going to place your shins on it. So currently now there is space between my kneecap and the mat. So again, it's a little trickier. You might have to curl your toes under, and I'll demonstrate what that means here. So my toes are curled under, my feet are facing the window behind me or the sofa behind me, and now my knees are floating in space. It's a little trickier for your core, but again, and your thighs have to work a little hard here, but that might be a viable option. Number 2, what if your wrists hurt when you put body weight on it? We can do a few different things. We can come onto our fists. So those knuckles will be pressing into the floor, maintaining that neutral wrist action as opposed to that 90-degree angle. Another thing you can do is fold up a smaller blanket. Place the heel of your palm on the blanket so you lessen that 90-degree angle. So maybe I'm more like a 45-degree here. And then of course there's less pressure. And then finally, I'm going to grab a chair. So just pardon me for 1 second, team, while I grab that chair. Lots of props today in our demos. Maybe those options don't work for you. And it doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me is that you're comfortable and you're successful in your movement practice. So here's a way that you can add a little less load on your palms, and it would look something like this. You push those hips back, find that neutral spine. Weight is mostly carried in the legs here. You're gonna have to keep a little bit of tone in through the belly, but there's probably maybe 20% of the weight on my wrists, maybe even less than there was previously. So that's a nice way. And if any of those don't work for you, you know what to do. You reach out to me again. We'll work one-on-one before a class to give you viable options so you can feel successful in your practice. The other thing I want to talk about is weight. So we know we want to maintain that neutral spine. And also when we are holding any amount of weight, whether it be a light weight, whether it be a heavy weight, we want to keep that weight closest to our body. We also will not be working with weights in a seated position in this class. Again, this is not a seated yoga class. This is not a seated exercise class in Move Better 55 Plus. If that was your understanding, please reach out to me. But in terms of weights, we're always going to hold those weights close to our body. Okay, so we will never use, like that is an example of a weight that was too heavy for me. 5-pound weights, we can practice with lateral raises because for me, that's manageable. It may or may not be manageable for you. However, we can figure that out as time goes by. I'll give you examples in each class of what is the appropriate weight based on the exercise. If we were doing a hip hinge, which I'll demonstrate various ways of hip hinging, we keep that weight really close to our body, not out here. Right? So if I hip hinge, I'm not letting my arms go out in front of my body. I'm keeping my weight close to my legs. In fact, my knuckles are touching my thighs. You could bring them forward. You can bring them to the side. I don't want to play favorites, so I bring them kind of like at the corner of my legs. So with the knees slightly unlocked for a traditional deadlift or a hip hinge, we're going to slide my knuckles down my thighs and come back up. Again, maintaining that neutral spine, find a sense of integrity in through those abdominals, and then let the weight bring you down, but then press your feet into the ground to come on up. All right, so a very common movement that you will find in each class and always kind of confuses people is hinging. And hinging requires us to move from the leg where it connects into our pelvis. So if you march right now, where the crease lies when you lift one leg up and the other leg up is where you will fold from in your hinge. So we have various types of hinges depending on what class, depending on the exercise or the focus of that particular class. The first one you can try with me, all 10 toes facing forward. Find where the crease of your hip is. Right? You can make a little shelf with your palms up, shoulders back, eyes on the horizon. You're going to unlock those knees. So they're slightly soft but not bent, right? And we're going to focus on your sit bones or your ischial tuberosities reaching back behind you. So I want you to test the waters at first. Keep your shoulders back. The muscles on your upper back slightly squeezing inwards towards your spine. And see how far you can go. It's really irrelevant to me, but what is relevant to me is that you keep your chin slightly tucked in, the back of the neck nice and long, and that you focus on that lifting up of your spine out of your waist. Remember, there is no articulation in this class. If your shoulders are rolling forward, you're flexing and rounding your spine. All right, so unlock those knees. Even if it means you only fold 10 degrees, that's your starting place. If you can fold 90 degrees, awesome. You don't really need much more than that in this posture. So this is a traditional hip hinge. In yoga, we call this Ardha Uttanasana, okay? The next type of hip hinge you would find is a stiff leg hip hinge. So what that means is I want you to pretend that you have no knee joint, Okay, so this is straight leg position, which means it's going to limit how far I can go. This is where you imagine you're at the edge of a hill, of a cliff, and you're just peering over the edge of that cliff. This will very much challenge your balance, which is not a bad thing. All right, so you're going to keep those legs as straight as you can and hinge with a flat back at the crease of your hip. You'll notice that the weight comes forward towards your heel, so I want you to focus on keeping the weight evenly distributed as best as you can. Big toe mound, pinky toe mound, center of heel. Equally weighted. Try not to press too much into one area or the other. So we've got traditional deadlift or hip hinge, soft knees. We've got stiff leg deadlift, legs 100% straight. And why we would use one over the other is one is more quadricep and hamstring. The other is definitively hamstring. I'll let you figure out which one those are. Another way to challenge our balance and proprioception with a hip hinge is the single leg. So if you take one foot on the floor, feet are starting hip width apart, and just take your toes on one foot behind you. So you're still in a train track, but you have a bit of a kickstand. And that kickstand location will vary depending on the exercise. I'm going to go ahead and take my shelf to the crease of my hips, unlock my hips and push them back behind me. Now you'll focus on pushing into that strong front leg and come on up. Let's do it one more time. Hinge, come up. You might as well try the other side at the same time. This is your little movement break here today. And hinge, come up. One more time, hinge, and come up. Good. Now, how would you make that more challenging over time? You would float your back leg up. So instead of having a kickstand, feet hip width apart, remember, we're not on a train track, not at this time. You never know, though, what the future holds of these programs, right, team? You're going to slowly float that leg behind you and come back up. You try it a couple of times on each leg. If you want to start by holding on to a chair, or I have my bike here, you can do that too. Knees would be slightly soft in this, so I would never do a stiff leg deadlift with y'all on a single leg, okay? So try it again. Soft knee, and then hinge, and come up, and again, and come up. Good job. Okay, so we have done neutral spine, supine, quadruped, standing, side lying. We can work through that depending on what class we're doing, but I will focus on trying to keep that spine long throughout the exercises. If you have any questions, again, I am always here for you. Just before our programs start, you will get a list of props that I highly recommend you access. Most of them are relatively affordable, even accessible at the local dollar stores or home hardware stores. But if you have any questions before our programs start and before you get your intro email with a copy of your links and all the important dates, you know where to reach me, team. Again, great job for signing up. I hope you're enjoying your workout videos that are keeping you busy while I'm on holiday. Have a great, great day, team, and I hope you're moving.